Nice timing. Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, how you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. Kind of stuttered on my end there, so I got an extra look at the airplane in the preview video, but
outstanding.
Yeah, all good.
Did you get a tail number?
I did not, but I bet it started with November.
Okay. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to today's live stream on Supply Chain Now. It's one of our favorite regular live streams. We're going to be talking about the U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index for Q4 2020. Greg, we've got a couple of business leaders. They're going to be sharing their key insights and key takeaways from this massive treasure trove of data and industry point of view, and they're well-versed in transportation markets, right? We've got one of the chief architects behind the report itself, as well as a leader from one of the leading transportation providers in the country. You excited?
We get the straight scoop, right? The analytics and what they show us, and then we find somebody who's dealing with the environment right in the real world to augment that point of view, right? To give us a ground view perspective of what's going on as well. So
absolutely. And as we've talked about, this represents the latest in our ongoing collaboration with US Bank. They do so much in the greater supply chain business community to power the transportation industry forward, which of course, Greg, is the huge critical backbone that makes supply chain happen, right?
Well, if you didn't know it before, and I don't know how you couldn't, but if you didn't know it before, reading this report enunciates it pretty clearly. I mean, some of the impact that we've seen on both the volume of shipments and the value of shipments is, it was eye-opening, frankly, reading through this analysis this time.
Agreed. And I think we've got a key data point, just how much volume is US Bank powering?
Yeah, I mean, in case you wonder why we do this and why we selected US Bank to do this, not only do they process almost $30 billion worth of freight transactions a year, but they've increased that by almost $1 billion over last year. So they continue to grow, they continue to have a greater impact and a greater collection of data. So it's a great source for understanding what's going on in transportation these days.
Agreed. And the Freight Payment Index comes out each quarter. It's free. You sign up for it. It's what's going to be guiding this conversation. We'll drop that note of the link where to sign up in the comments here momentarily. But really quick, Greg, let's say hello to a few folks, and then we're going to bring in our two featured guests here today.
Yes, sir.
All buckled up?
I am. I got my hands and arms inside the vehicle.
Okay. Well, say hello to Pat, who's tuned in from Canada via LinkedIn. Pat, great to have you here. Fod is tuned in via LinkedIn. Thanks so much for joining us. Thor, good afternoon. I think Minnesota, but I think Thor joined us last week.
Yeah,
Minnesota. So great to have you once again. Peter, the aviation industry guru, is with us.
Air Canada.
That's right.
Yes, it's Air Canada.
Once again here. Edgar is with us via LinkedIn. Great to have you here as well. Welcome to all of our community members. Looking forward to your key takeaways from today's
Edgar looks like he's in someplace really interesting. I'd love to get it. I'd love to know where that picture is.
Edgar, we want to triangulate a little bit. Let us know where you're dialed in from. All right. With no further ado, let's welcome in our two guests here today. Bobby Holland, Vice President, Director, Freight Data Solutions with US Bank, and Frank Hurst, President with Roadrunner Freight. Hey, good afternoon, Bobby and Frank. How are we doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Well, great to have you back, Bobby. We've really enjoyed the series. We're into our second season now, I guess. It's kind of like Seinfeld maybe or something. But we've really enjoyed, learned a ton, and have gotten some great responses from our community, which is the smartest community around. So welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
And
yeah,
Frank,
great having you.
And you're a repeat guest. We love our Greg and the whole team here. We love our repeat guests, and we've got two of those here today. Looking forward to what you're seeing. Leading a leading shipping organization.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, guys. Welcome to. I'm glad to be back. It's I was thinking earlier this morning. If you go back a couple years ago when I was first on Supply Chain Now, we broke all the rules. We sat around a table that wasn't even 6 feet 6 feet apart. So it's
right,
guys, over Zoom, over TV.
Well,
that
we'll
was
do
a
that
small
again.
table because that was early days, Frank. Right?
That's right.
Mean, I think we were in the upper deck. Were we in the upper deck at Vector?
Upper deck.
We were up in the loft, and I think that Greg might have been sitting on Scott's lap. I'm not sure. It was a pretty tight
and they were having meetings while we were doing it. So I mean, it sounded like we were in a boiler room.
Right.
Well,
fun.
I think my dog was on a treadmill powering the broadcast back in those days. But nevertheless, well, let's Frank, I appreciate you sharing a little bit of our connection there. We're gonna get to know you a little bit better here momentarily, but Bobby Holland, our audience has chimed in and appreciate your perspective and expertise. You're not new, but for the 2 or 3 people that may be joining this one for the first time, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I have an extensive background in software engineering and software architecture. My experience at the bank has been in product management, specifically around technical products, data-related products, and that's how I find myself as in Freight Data Solutions. Our scope is data and analytics, and the Freight Payment Index was our first product to market.
And tons of data points to compress, analyze, and then churn out a report that folks that aren't nearly as smart as you, like me, can understand what's going on in the marketplace. So really appreciate that. All right, Frank, tell us more about yourself.
Yes, so Frank Hurst, I'm president of Roadrunner Freight. I've been at Roadrunner for 4 years. And we're a nationwide long-haul, metro-to-metro LTL provider with 22 brick-and-mortar service centers across the country. Been in the business for 25 years, of which the majority has been in the LTL business. Started off in the business operating a forklift, got a CDL, drove a tractor-trailer for a while before moving into leadership. And, as Greg and Scott know, I love talking about trucks and drivers. And probably my number one job is being a champion to over 1,000 truck drivers that take care of our customers and partner with Roadrunner Freight every day. So I'm really glad to be here and talk with Bobby and you guys today.
Love that.
Still connected to the folks at the wheel, Frank, is you can literally talk to Frank if you know how to get to him, right? So, yeah.
Well, hey, Greg, before we
yes, Scott
here, we have a couple of folks chime in, including folks bringing you a personal message, like Paula, who says she's from the Kansas City area. Go Chiefs, of course.
Thanks, Paula.
It's great to have. Let's see here, Rabiel, maybe tuned in via LinkedIn. Great to have you here. Gary up in New York City is with us. Great to have you, Gary. Let's see, Pat. Very interesting topic today, Pat. You're right. Just buckle up. You're going to get a ton of insights of what's going on in industry. So great to have you here. All right, Greg, where are we going next?
Well, I think it's got to be gratifying, Bobby, for you to hear people say that data is a really interesting topic, and this is particularly valuable data, because it is reflecting, especially this quarter. Is this the 5th time we've done this? It's especially reflecting of some significant changes in what's going on in the country. So tell us a little bit about the data, how you collect it, a little bit about the index and how it works, just to refresh people's memory, and what makes this such a valuable piece of information for companies like Frank's.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned earlier, we process a lot of transactions. By the end of 2020, it was $29.7 billion in payment transactions. And so we take that data and we statistically distill out, if you will, our quarter over quarter and year over year metrics for the index. We compare, again, quarter over quarter, it's a chain-based index. And again, there's a lot of tweaks and adjustments under the covers, but the net is that we believe that it represents our view of the economy at large as I believe we're a lagging indicator. So it's basically processes truckload and less than truckload data, because that comprises about 80% of our processing, and it will eventually be adding other types of data, but currently it's just truckload and less than truckload. But it represents a statistically accurate picture, we believe, of the marketplace and of the economy at large.
Yeah, and the index itself is baselined at 100, basically, right?
Yeah, it's chain based, so it starts at 100, but each quarter is compared to the previous quarter. And like I said, we do some balancing in a same store sales type approach to be sure that we're measuring U.S. bank business progress, but that we're actually, like I said, measuring our view of the economy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so it levels out all of those things that could be happening that would skew it, other than just the impact of growth of pricing or number of shipments, right?
Correct.
Frank, tell us a little bit about, thank you, Bobby. Tell us a little bit, Frank, about how you all use it. I mean, this directly impacts, or is it directly a result and probably a measurement of the shipments you guys at Roadrunner are making every day, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you think of electronic freight payment and audit, you have to think of U.S. Bank, right? I mean, I think it's over $30 billion in global freight payments. That defines big data and business intelligence.
That's right.
So, from our standpoint, we're a network business. So understanding consumer trends allow us to position equipment, drivers, as well as we think about strategically, how do we price the business for even our customers as well. So having information around what's going on in the market allows us to predictively plan what we're going to do in the future, but also look at how we plan our network overall.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see, because of particularly what's been happening. I don't want to issue a spoiler alert, but particularly what's happening regarding volumes and capacity, and of course rates. I'm really interested to see what your perspective on that is, Frank, because you were right in the heart of it.
We are. Yeah, we're kind of on both sides, right? We purchase transportation in the market. We also have independent contractors, and then we've got customers as well that we provide services for. So we kind of see it from all three angles.
Wow.
I'm glad to hear your perspective on the independent contractors, because we touch on that just a little bit.
Outstanding. We're going to touch on all of it. I mean,
yeah, look forward to that.
All encompassing report on the freight market here. Hey, say hello to a few folks. Kavan has joined us. Madison in Indianapolis has joined us. Melanie, great to have you here from South America or
South Africa or San Antonio.
Yeah, we'll find out. Yeah, that's
we need to know.
And Joseph Moretta up in the Northeast is with us as well. And Jeff,
good to have him back.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff. We like these quarterly reports as well. Hi from the 6IX. We'll find out what that means too. So great to have each
19. I bet that's his area code. Or no, I don't know.
I
don't know what it is.
Decipher that code.
Yeah, man. We've got a lot of interpretation we need done. So we probably ought to jump into the interpretation of this.
Right. Toronto.
Analysis, right?
Toronto is what Clay and the research team is sharing. By the way, we've dropped the direct link to U.S. Bank corporate payments where you can sign up for the freight payment index. We'll touch on that once again. Let's dive into the data. So, Bobby, let's start with kind of level setting a bit, setting the table a little bit rather at a high level. Tell us kind of nationally, set the table a bit before we dive in region by region.
Okay, well, as you can see from the chart that's up, we had a 5.3% increase in the national shipments index in Q4 2020, and the spend index was up 19.7% over the third quarter. So you can see that huge gains, but spending outpaced volumes, and that kind of touches on the capacity issue. The main drivers for these increases, we see that the truck freight market was strong during the final quarter of 2020. Consumer spending appeared to remain strong and grow, especially e-commerce and other ancillary industries such as home construction helped to keep the indexes push them higher. And then we saw, though, that manufacturing and energy, despite some modest increase, still continued lower. But again, the big takeaway is that spending increased much more than the shipment volumes. And a lot of things kind of tilt into this. Qualified drivers are difficult to recruit and retain for motor carriers. And again, I'd be interested to hear Frank's perspective on that. But qualified drivers are difficult to retain. A lot of that is still largely due to COVID impacts. Department of Motor Vehicle closings and reduced services, social distancing rules make it harder to train. And so fewer drivers were added in 2020 than in 2019. And then one of the other impacts was the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. One of the statistics we had was that some 46,000 drivers were logged on this, but only about 5,000 were able to get cleared. And so, that puts a huge dent in the market. And then COVID-19, again, still impacting not only in the training side, but also, drivers just plain getting sick.
Right. Mm-hmm. Or exposed, right?
And then rising liability claims premiums are another are hurting carriers in the market. So all of these things contribute to tighten up the capacity, which is going to drive rates up.
I appreciate that overview. We're going to dive in region by region. But before we do, Frank, initial responses to any of those factors that are headwinds and tailwinds?
Yeah, I think so. What Bobby covered is exactly what we're seeing in the market from capacity tightness, as well as from a pricing stability, and also just from recruiting and demand from a driver standpoint. I think it's great to see that there's material creation of freight in the supply chain, which really shows us where we need to continue to position equipment and drivers to those regions that we'll talk about in a minute, where we're going to see continual growth overall. But I think the one thing Bobby mentioned is about the impact on the driver, right? And I think really what we're seeing is that drivers can be much more selective in an environment like this about the loads they choose, and it really puts the onus back on the shipper and the carrier to make sure that the loads we have are closed on time. Obviously, we're taking care of our drivers, and most importantly, a safe environment that they feel confident to be in, because they're such a valuable resource in a market like this.
Oh, I'm going to say it, Scott. You're muted.
I got to get quicker on the trigger there. E-commerce, the explosion of e-commerce is really interesting. We've mentioned drivers a couple times. I'm sure we're going to a couple more times before we're done here today. But with the explosion of e-commerce, as we've all seen, and it will continue, it's opened up a lot of other options, that local delivery options and final mile options that makes it tougher, it seems like, from what we've read and who we've talked to recruit long haul drivers. So no shortage of factors. Greg, what's a couple things that Bobby shared that stand out to you?
Yeah, well, one is the impact of liability insurance. I mean, we've heard firsthand on these shows that is impacting the number of smaller carriers, that many carriers they're just going out of business as opposed to paying the large premiums. And some of that is due to, at least some of the reporting we're seeing, is it's due to people targeting these companies for major insurance claims. Whether they're legitimate or not, they are still kind of coming after those. And I think that has really disrupted. The other is the generational transition. And I think, Frank, I'd be interested in your perspective on this, but the generational transition that we're seeing, whereas the generation that has been the drivers is exiting the workforce rather rapidly, and the subsequent generations are not really that interested in, Scott, as you said, long haul driving. If you put that in kind of rank order, Frank, is that top, middle, bottom of the three top issues in terms of driver availability?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, obviously, there's a large contingency of drivers that during this pandemic that have kind of decided to sit on the sidelines, right, and maybe not drive during this period. Or the trend that we're seeing is drivers want to be closer to home. They want more home time. So they don't want to go some of the long haul routes they would before. They want to stay regionally so they can stay close to home. And then, one of the challenges that's always on the top of our list is how do we recruit females into driving positions, and to your point, the younger generation, and how can we be a kind of a company of choice that drivers want to partner with us. And it's kind of the things that we do from a recruiting standpoint to bring those drivers in.
I feel like if you let all your drivers start a YouTube channel, then you get a lot more millennial and Gen Z drivers.
We've got a lot of those. I tell you, it's so funny is that a lot of times when I'm at home, I follow a bunch of drivers on YouTube. I know you made a reference in a prior show about a team driver. They should do a shoot on YouTube, but it's the truth. It's like you can see the day in the life of a driver, the challenges they face, why they love the profession, and it really allows us the insight to when we go think about recruiting and the changes that we make internally to be again a destination of choice for independent contractors and drivers.
I love that.
Very cool. That's very cool.
It really is fascinating TV. I'm following several on YouTube. In fact, we just interviewed Wayne Craig, who will be releasing next week, who drives that. Consumers would be much more understanding, considerate drivers if we all knew what our truck drivers go through. So I'm glad that came up here today.
Amen.
All right. So let's, Bobby, we want to go region by region. I want to start in the up in the northwest, or I'm sorry, northeast, because a lot of these have some different dimensions. Let's start with some of your observations up in the northeast.
Well, the
Northeast. Let's go with that.
The northeast was up 1.3 in shipping and 14.9% in spend. The market's mixed in this region. As we see with most regions, retail sales have been good, again, especially online e-commerce. But we've had spikes up here in the fourth quarter, so that kind of brought some of the numbers down. Again, factory activity was down year over year, and there is some energy production in the Northeast, and energy in general was down, so that affected this region. But single-family home construction was up year over year, but not as much as in other regions. But with all of that going on, this region was also affected by the capacity crunch. As you can see, again, almost 10 times, more than 10 times the increase in spend is over volumes. So,
and I believe if I've got the data right, the Northeast region is the slowest recovering freight market out of all five as well. Hey, really quick to our audience, our community there, let us know. We want to feature your observations from the freight market, regardless where you live. We'd welcome. What are you seeing, volume wise, pricing wise, issue wise, industry issue wise? You name it, drop it in there. We want to share that as we have this conversation here. All right, so Frank, we started in the Northeast. You heard some of the unique dynamics there. Any observations on your end?
Yeah, I think really it goes back to what was mentioned earlier, e-commerce and final mile delivery. One of the big things that we're seeing is inbound into the Northeast from a e-retail standpoint. Obviously, we anticipate, because there's a lot of pharma that comes out of the Northeast, that we anticipate that we should see some growth coming back out of that area. We just recently opened a facility in Philadelphia just because of the fact that we know we need our own brick and mortar there because of the lack of external capacity. But I think one of the things Bobby's has been talking about is just the variance between shipments and spend, and really shows the willingness of customers to pay for that additional demand that's in the market today.
Excellent point. Greg, I want you to weigh in, but really quick, Ed Cody says, hey, we should consider establishing career path for truck drivers in high school, like a vocational program. And Nicole, hello, Nicole, great to have you here. Educating potential workforce. Love it. Hey, I'm with you, Nicole. Great point there. All right, Greg, based on these observations, Bobby and Frank are talking about, any key thought here?
Yeah, just to echo a bit of what Bobby said, is, energy production had a humongous impact on the growth in this. Humongous is a technical term that Bobby's not allowed to use. It had a significant impact because West Virginia and Pennsylvania are both big energy producing states in the Northeast, and again, because energy consumption was generally down, that had a pretty significant impact. And of course, I think anyone who's been reading the paper has seen that a lot of people are moving from portions of the Northeast. That has to have offset some of the creation of new housing starts, right? Because the main measurement is not necessarily home sales, it's housing starts, because that's what drives trucking, not just necessarily selling a house.
Excellent point. Excellent point. All right, so Bobby, let's go now to the Southeast, from Northeast to the Southeast. What were some of your observations there?
Southeast, a lot better. Of course, the Southeast usually does really well in general. 7.1% in the increase in the shipment index, and 23%, over 23% in the spend index. Again, common theme, strong retail sales. We've seen that, pretty much across all the regions. Again, same with housing construction, housing starts. We had a statistic of 20% over, increase in housing starts, single-family housing starts over in 2019. The Southeast also has significant auto production, which helps the manufacturing, which trickles down into the market. So they had a lot of good factors going from, not to mention the fact that they're one of the more fully opened regions. So the COVID impacts on the transportation market were lessened to that extent.
Excellent point. Hey, I want to feature this comment from Madison real quick.
Yeah.
Your follow-up, Frank. So she runs a lot of freight in Tennessee, sees the market going down a lot according to DAT, but then have drivers asking for way more. So Madison, thanks for sharing what you're seeing there. And by the way, Gary, I think, is making a play at my mistake. Interesting Northwest information. So I think I said that first. So thanks, Gary. Hey, it's good to have a sense of humor in these things. So thanks so much. All right, Frank, talking about Southeast. Tell us more. What are you seeing in the Southeast?
Yeah, really, I think the Southeast has been.
It's hard to say, isn't it?
Hard to say, right? Almost to the Northwest, but the Southeast has been strong. It seems like even starting middle of summer, right? It really, as Bobby mentioned, hasn't really slowed down. Seems to be more open from an area. Oddly enough, a couple of data points from us is that we're seeing Florida and Georgia, from a recruiting standpoint, having the largest number of applications coming out the first of the year. So, and especially if you compare year to date in 2021, our applicant flow out of the Southeast is almost double what it was the last 9 weeks. So I think it maybe speaks about the rapid increase in that state and where we're heading in the Southeast.
Frank, are you seeing a commensurate downturn in maybe the areas that these people could have been moving from? Do you think they've quit their job before and moved and now looking for a new job? Any explanation for why that would be happening?
The only thing I can figure is because it seems like those states have been open a little bit longer, right? And I think that's one of the. We have a lot of drivers that are in Florida, Georgia. They love that that warmer weather. And I also think that, in a market that we're talking about today where there's such high demand for the low capacity, drivers have the choice now to choose the lanes they want to go, right? So if they want to live in the Southeast and drive, in the southern states and stay out of the weather, they have the potential of doing that. So I think that kind of speaks to where the demand is in the market, or that they, where in maybe years past they might have taken that load to Chicago or to Boston or to Seattle. Now they may choose to go to Dallas and Commerce, where they have less inclement weather.
Interesting.
Greg, this is, really, Bobby and Frank are illustrating why it's so important to have both sides of the equation. I love the how Bobby is sharing what the data is sharing. It's telling us, and Frank is that finger on the pulse. So it's really why it works so well.
Well, and I think the data is really, really compelling this time around. Not that it's not usually, but it's compelling in some ways, in many ways, in a very positive direction. A 20% increase in housing starts in the Southeast. That's incredible. And I think that's reflective of the inverse of what we were talking about in the Northeast, because the smart people from the Northeast, Bobby's a really smart person, but so many of the smart people from the Northeast are moving to Florida and Georgia, where it's much, much warmer, Bobby. Much warmer. Notice.
Yeah, I was about to say, to live here. So
Come on down. Hey, Bobby, we'll do it in person next time. We'd love to have you down here.
Yeah,
and we'll do that soon enough.
we actually have done that. The very first one we did in person, didn't we? Yeah.
That's right.
Down there, but
And we'll
got
do it
you out of the winter for a week, Bobby. That's as good as we can do, but we're aiming to do it again.
awesome.
And I think, as regards the Southeast, that's a really interesting observation, Frank, you made. The rates are up substantially in this area. And Bobby, this will sound familiar. We saw so much freight going around the backups on the West Coast ports through the canal and to Charleston and Savannah, particularly. I think we're seeing more in Brunswick as well. As you said, automotive. A lot of automotive goes in and out of Brunswick as well. So, and one of the things that's interesting to me about the numbers is, as red hot as the Southeast is, in Q3, it was even more so. The Q over Q, right? Volumes were up over 12% in Q3 and 7.3% in Q4, reflecting, I believe, the front loading, not necessarily front loading, but the front loading of peak volumes into Q3 rather than waiting and risking the fact that they may not be able to be delivered because of capacity constraints in Q4. So it's a really interesting. It really is an interesting set of data, particularly this time around.
Agreed. And Gary Smith, by the way, he's running supply chains up in New York City, dealing with those very cold temperatures. He's coming back to Georgia though really soon. Great to have you here, Gary. All right. So we're going to go we've covered the Northeast. We've covered the Southeast. Now we're going to tackle the Midwest. So Bobby, tell us more.
Midwest in shipments was up 4.6%, and the spin index, again, consistent with what we've been seeing, 16.1% over the third quarter. Again, manufacturing's big in the Midwest, and it's improving. Still off from recent highs, but that's to be expected. Given the situation that the country's been through and still recovering from. Again, single family starts were up roughly 25% in fourth quarter 2020 over fourth quarter 2019. Again, just basically the freight and the driver shortage are keeping the capacity tight. So consistent story across this region as well.
Yeah, definitely a lot of common themes and unique themes across these regions. Frank, any observations there in the Midwest?
Yeah, very similar to what Bobby mentioned. I think the real key about when I think of the Midwest is the impact on the region we're getting ready to talk about in a minute, and that's the West, right? And that's the drivers that are in Indianapolis and Chicago and Milwaukee and so forth, wanting to get back out west to pull those loads coming back as well. So we're seeing it's great to see the Midwest is starting from a manufacturing standpoint to jump on the rise again. Obviously, during the early parts of spring or summer, it was really slow in this area. But it's really good to see the rebound coming that we saw in the fourth quarter, and anticipate that going on the first quarter as well.
Excellent point. And hey, really quick, Gary, great question. We're going to tackle the West region here momentarily, and he wants us to discuss the backup of the ports relative to freight costs. So we're going to touch on that probably here momentarily. Greg, any additional? Hey, the Midwest includes the air capital of the world, Wichita, Kansas. Any comments on your end?
I did see the one truck go through Wichita. Yes. So, I think the Midwest is so dependent on agriculture, and we're out of season for agriculture and manufacturing. And as Frank said, we're starting to see the rise in manufacturing, but also housing starts. I mean, double-digit increase in housing starts in the Midwest. And I think that's reflectant of the ability of people now to work from anywhere. We know that people are flooding out of New York and the Northeast, and we know that people are flooding particularly out of the Valley in California and other parts of California, and maybe some other states out there. And they have to go somewhere, and I think really some of them are. I've heard anecdotally from so many people who are getting closer to their original home. so they can be around elderly parents or whatever. So I have a feeling that is having some impact on the Midwest.
Excellent
There
point.
certainly are not more farmers moving in the Midwest, right? I mean, with the corporate farms just getting larger and larger,
Right.
It's not as if people are homesteading again.
Well, all right. So we've covered the Northeast, Southeast, Midwest. Again, to our community members that are tuned in, two things really quick. Hey, let us hear what you're seeing in the freight market, regardless of what region. And number two, we're going to drop the link in. I think we already have once, but we'll put the link in there where you can find this free information on the freight payment index powered by U.S. Bank. All right, let's go to the Southwest next. Bobby, what are you seeing there?
Southwest shipments were up 2.7%. After a contraction in the third quarter, and the index was up almost 7% over third quarter. This region is a mix of economic trends. On one hand, truck transport from Mexico continued to improve, which helped the volumes. Again, seeing single-family housing starts coming up, benefiting from low mortgage rates. However, energy production, because it's still depressed, particularly in Texas and Oklahoma, although up somewhat in New Mexico, in general, the truck traffic associated with energy continues to be lower than normal.
Yeah, oil production being down. Hopefully, as you mentioned, the Mexican market and all the burgeoning manufacturing activity taking place down there, as well as the streamlined shipping across the border, is going to help.
Yeah.
So Frank, what are some of the things you're seeing in the Southwest?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that the two of the top areas we had were Georgia and Florida for driver applications. Texas is right there, so we're seeing the same increase in Texas for driver applications. Oddly enough for us is that we have a service center in Dallas, Texas, and we've been a hiring mode in Texas for dock employees and obviously drivers, but dock employees especially for the last 4 to 5 months. And it's been such a tough market to recruit dock employees in that market, which kind of speaks to the demand that's there and the growth that's happened over the past several months.
Excellent point. We've heard no shortage of creative recruiting practices and retention practices for drivers. Things from ensuring really timely, 2 or 3 days load payments to even in some cases making it easier for drivers to get into new vehicles with little to no money down. So it's like whatever it takes is the mindset right now. Greg, any additional comments on your end
Yeah, just a couple quick ones. I think Texas is, of course, benefiting from the flow of people out of California. It seems like that's the only other state that they've thought of in the union when they head out of California is, I'm going to Texas. And I think, and I'm curious to see, Frank, what you think, what else you think could be impacting this. I believe that USMCA and some streamlining of flow of goods from Mexico to the States and back, of course, I believe that is having some impact here as well. Have you seen anything that indicates that specifically as an impact?
It could be. We've seen growth that's come out of Texas, high demand for, like I said, the past 4 or 5 months has been very solid. So, especially we're seeing some nice growth coming out of the kind of border area as well, pushing back north. So it could be some of the volumes coming out of the maquiladoras coming back into the U.S.
Right.
All right. So now we're doing a round robin across the region. We arrive at the Wild Wild West, and there's no shortage of topics to tackle here. So, Bobby, what are you seeing?
Shipment index up 7.2% in this region, and the West Spend Index was up 25%, and it was the most of any of the 5 regions from the second quarter, which was at the bottom of that U or V-shaped or W-shaped curve. Port volumes are the impact here. Import volumes fueled the gain as retailers scrambled to, get goods in from China and Asia and generally to satisfy holiday demand. Also, retail inventories relative to sales were at all-time lows across the board. Retail chains need to get even more products in to replenish those inventories as well as to stock up. And then again, new Single-family housing starts in the region were running over 30% higher during the fourth quarter of 2020 than over Q4 2019. And then again, this trickled down to the driver shortage and rising rates due to having to recruit and pay, what the drivers needed to get them on board.
All right. So, Frank, a couple of your observations from the West region.
Wow. That's, this seems like that's been the topic of conversation for the last 6 months, right? It's all about trying to get capacity. It's really reverse. We're working to get equipment and drivers into California so they can push loads back out for us. I think it really speaks to, again, about the demand in the market and lack of capacity. I was not surprised at all to see the spin where it was. We get phone calls all day long from shippers wanting additional capacity out of California, and really comes around, our need to strategically price to make sure the quality of revenue that we handle out of California matches what we pay in the open market, especially because in a market that's been as dynamic as it's been off the West Coast, this has been some headwinds from a cost and pricing standpoint, for sure.
So it takes me back to Monday, Greg. We had Jamin, our local correspondent on the West Coast, give us a report right there from the harbor, and you could see all the ships, stacked from the port. Sorry. You can see all the ships, and he was giving us a directional this way and that way, really kind of a lay of the land for folks that haven't been to, the Port of Long Beach and others on the West Coast. So, but Greg, a couple of your observations from the West region.
I frankly was stunned by the double-digit increase in housing starts in the West. I can only believe that they must be outside of California, or else that though everyone is making a lot of noise about moving out of California, they may only be moving out of the unbelievably expensive areas like San Diego and LA and the Valley into more of the high desert or eastern portions of the state. That's the only thing I can figure. I know that there are a lot of people moving to Arizona and Nevada, and I can assure you that if they are used to living in California, they will soon regret that because they're not used to the heat. But I think that's interesting. And then, of course, the capacity constraints. We know all about the container shortages, that are issues in the ports, and of course the backup of, that we just spoke to. So that's got to be causing problems. And I know that, earlier, even in Q4, we were talking about the inability of getting exports to the ports, containers for exports to the ports, right, to be able to export other than import anything. And, so many ships going back to APAC with empty containers on them to try and bring more and more imports in. So there is definitely a market imbalance there. And I think that's what's a portion of what we're seeing reflected here.
Excellent point. And, we touched also on the Supply Chain Buzz on Monday about because of all the pressure on volume, container ships are going taller and taller, which is one of the reasons why we've seen over 3,000 containers lost in the first month of 2021. So it's fascinating, really. Let's share a couple of comments from our audience, and then Greg, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and we're going to talk about a couple of key takeaways.
Yeah.
So Thor, both of y'all, all y'all were talking about finding those containers, but also
chassis
that are difficult to come by. He also says that additionally, finding that international suppliers are willing to offer discounts in order to secure Incoterms that wash their hands of freight responsibility. Love that. Gary says they have stopped Port River access into eastern Washington, Idaho, and moved to trucking. So, definitely adding to more a tighter trucking market there. Peter says in Montreal, home sale prices have gone up over 20% in 2020. And we are talking about first homes and how important that is in these data points. Gone up over 20% in 2020. What was selling in 2019 for $450 is now at $540. Wow, insane. I feel for all those that are looking forward to buying their first homes. Goodness gracious, $540. Can you imagine signing that paperwork for $540K on your first home. I certainly cannot.
Well, here in the South, I mean, we're seeing what they used to see in California, which is bidding wars above asking price. We had a house sell up the street from us for asking price, and 3 months later, the people had to move, and they're now benefiting from a bidding war over the price of the house, which they had already increased by 15%. So it's a mad world right now in some of these areas.
Colorado, it supports the data on the housing starts.
It absolutely does.
Colorado is like going crazy. It's like people, just lost their minds on buying a house.
Agreed.
I think when you come from some of these really high dollar markets, even if it's above market price, the price still looks cheap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this was not unlike what we saw in the mid 90s when we lived in Arizona. The very same house by the very same builder was 4 times as expensive in California as we paid for it. And then the people who moved from California to buy our house were more than happy to pay half of what they had paid for the previous house, which was twice what we had paid for it. So I think, I don't think we want to speculate on what that's going to mean for the housing market in the future, but right now it is definitely having an impact.
I love that. I love that quick right turn there, Greg. So
almost had to give a tangent alert there.
So where are we going next?
Yeah, so let's, Bobby, I know I'd love to get, if you can give us kind of a macro recap. We all know, and I will reiterate on your behalf, that you cannot predict, right, because of regulatory reasons from working for a bank. But I'd love to get kind of a recap from your standpoint. And Frank, we know you can predict or at least prophesy on what you see coming. So Bobby, would you mind giving us kind of a quick high level assessment of where we stand, what that means?
Yeah, well, in previous issues of the Freight Payment Index, we talked about, we didn't predict per se, but there was the notion that, the recovery would follow the opening of the economy. As more things opened up, the business would flow, the trucking would flow. And we can kind of see that's what's happening. There were a lot of decisions that were made earlier in 2020 to adjust to the state of the pandemic at that time. And I think what we're seeing is, as a result of opening up, there's a reversal on some of those decisions. Capacity was tightening right after the pandemic and the shutdowns. Again, decisions were being made. People stopped buying trucks. The market just slumped. And so what we're seeing, I guess, is, to put it in a nutshell, is the result of things opening up are following that trajectory. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that it continues, to the extent that the vaccine takes hold, to the extent that, things open up more fully across the board, because there's still pockets where there's still, they're not completely shut down, but, things are still at half-mast in a lot of places. Up here in New York is one of them. So right. To the extent that it continues to open up, we should continue to see things start to get back to what would have been considered normal. Because even though we've got some fantastic numbers, which shows how quickly things have begun to recover, we're still not where we were, say, even 2 years ago when we were flying, like mad in 2018 and early 2019. So,
yeah,
nice to get back to that, but we'll see.
Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate that. And yeah, I agree. I think there's some aspect of pent-up demand here, obviously, as we've seen in some of these numbers. So, Frank, would you care to address that particular point or any others? And maybe, since you can, give us a little look into the future.
Sure. Yeah, I think that I think Bobby's exactly right. I think everything we're seeing is extremely positive from a economic standpoint. We're very hopeful, right, that as the vaccine continues to roll out, that we can get back to normal in a lot of areas and kind of get some of the same growth in the Midwest that we've seen into the Southeast. I think one of the data points that I got out of the report was that truck driving schools have witnessed lower class sizes in the last 6 months due to physical distancing requirements and so forth. I think which tells us that even as the vaccine rolls out, we're probably going to anticipate still a tight demand, a capacity crunch for new drivers entering the market, even though that we're hopeful that some of the older drivers that get vaccines may come back and enter the trucking industry. So I think it's the way we see it is that we see it, the trajectory that we're on right now. I see no reason to think that's not going to continue through the next quarter. And like in many things in this economy, is that service and quality wins the day, right? Whether we're a carrier from a shipper standpoint, they're looking for consistency and capacity and service and quality. And they're willing to pay more for that level of service. But again, like I mentioned earlier, as a carrier and a provider of transportation, but also from a driver standpoint, they're going to want to partner with those customers and those carriers where they can get in and out quickly. They've got safe environments where they feel safe overall, as well as they've got a culture of people around them that put their arms around them and support them every day. Because of everything that's happened over the last 8 to 9 months, I think, or a year really, I think the one thing that stands out is how proud I am to be associated with truck drivers and frontline workers who have kept America moving during this period. And they're really the unsung heroes of the past 12 months.
That is a wonderful point.
No doubt. And that very, very front line, so many people on the front line have just continued working through this whole thing. And we used to talk about that a lot early on, but I think that's a very, very important point. Not, of course, the drivers and the people who work with them, right? The people at the warehouses and lumpers and whoever else gets engaged, people who work at the truck stops or retail stores or whatever that they're servicing. I think that's a really important thing to think about.
From my perspective is, we started work from home. One of the biggest challenges that I had personally was the fact that I was working from home, and I knew that in 22 service centers, we had, drivers and office employees and dock workers that they just went to work every day, right? They wore the mask, they social distance. We had all the safe requirements in the facilities, but it was hard for me knowing that they're out on the front lines working as hard as they can to continue to progress our company forward. And I wasn't able to be alongside of them. So I think that's where, personally for me, that's where I'm so excited for the vaccine to get into implementation so we can get back out and kind of be face-to-face with a lot of those employees and independent contractors and really thank them face-to-face for the work that they've done.
I think you identified just how important drivers are in the scenario where the drivers are considered essential and the president of the company is not.
That's
right. I think that enunciates just how critical they are to the day-to-day success of the industry, no doubt.
I want
go ahead.
Add a play on what Frank said, because we gained another T-shirt-ism, Greg and Bobby. So, but I'm going to add a little addendum to it. Service and quality win the day, but our truck drivers, retail workers, and supply chain workers save the day. And that cannot be accentuated enough. So, Frank, I really appreciate you making that point. And, hey, we talked about this, I think, last time you came on and joined us. We'd love to, if you've got a driver or two that can really share their unique POV with our community. Again, we can't overstate it enough of how critical a task and some of the unique challenges they have with what they do in that noble mission day in and day out. So thanks so much. All right. It's been fascinating. So we've got a couple of quick comments I want to share. Be ready, Frank and Bobby. Gary has enjoyed the information. He's going to track y'all both down. So good stuff there, Gary. It sounds like you could contribute quite a bit to our discussion here. Peter says something we're all kind of referencing: COVID demand versus supply impacted all aspects of our supply chains and prices. It's a great point. We were talking earlier this week, Greg, a medical gown, according to some healthcare CEOs, 90 cents prior to the pandemic, over $9 now, which is crazy. But let's make sure. So, Bobby, we've dropped the link in, and we had the link featured on some of the visuals there. But let's make sure folks know how to connect and sign up for the Freight Payment Index, but also connect with you.
Well, for the index, freight.usbank.com. And basically fill out, some contact information, and it sets up a subscription or receive it through email quarterly. And if you need to reach out to me personally, it's bobby.holland@usbank.com.
Outstanding. And if you're listening to this on the replay, which we'll drop this in our podcast channels in just a couple of days, we'll have the direct link to sign up. We'll also have the LinkedIn profile both for Bobby Holland and Frank Hurst to make it as easy as possible. So, Frank, what about you? I really appreciate this tandem approach to telling us what's going on with freight. How can folks connect with you and the Roadrunner Freight team is certainly on the move?
Sure. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. Obviously, I've been a longtime supporter of Supply Chain Now and follower. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, and please follow Roadrunner on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We've got we have a new tagline. It's "Ship it like you own it," and that's so you'll see a lot of things around. You're really trying to drive the focus of taking care of our customers' freight and really running our business as if it were our employees and our independent contractors' own business. So please come see us on those channels.
We've got a regular tagline every so often. I'm going to get that down. I promise I've done this before. Both of these folks are folks that you'd like to work for. I know I'd like to work for. And that's one of the great compliments, and all the guests that we interview, when we rub elbows and hear from folks that really they get it and they know what's going on, and they've got a ton of respect for who really makes stuff happen and move stuff, make stuff, get stuff to where it needs to be across the retail industry. So really appreciate that to you both. Greg, we're going to wrap here in a minute, but let's say thanks again to Bobby Holland, Vice President, Director of Freight Data Solutions at U.S. Bank, and then Frank Hurst, President at Roadrunner Freight. Thank you to you both for joining us, and we look forward to reconnecting soon.
Yeah, thank you much, gents.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Some days that mute button just gets you a couple extra times. And clearly it bit me a few times here today. But you're in
the lair, so you shouldn't have any concern unless you're yelling at your kids. You shouldn't have any concerns about any ambient noise hitting your mic.
Well, I think we had a delivery or two hitting.
Okay.
Counts here, so I was trying to keep that. But nevertheless, a ton of activity, across Twitter, across the comments in our community here on the feed itself. For that matter, all the data that the Freight Payment Index delivers, and then Frank's, anecdotal, been there, done that observation, which really brings it home, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, if you don't know that Bobby and his team are the consummate professionals in assessing and presenting this information, even in the document itself. First of all, I would encourage anyone to subscribe to this document. But I still think that the narrative around it is so important. Even that Bobby can't share futures and things like that, again, because of regulatory things. The insights that he gives in, as an addendum to what this document and data share is really powerful. And somehow hearing almost the same information coming from him, you do get a bit more out of it from that, right? And then Frank, we've had a lot of people join us, some people who are analysts of the industry. We've had people from Bloomberg and Gartner and others join us, but some and some retailers, right? We had VP of supply chain at Home Depot for our very first one. But somehow when it's the people who are running the trucks, the perspective is just that much more insightful and ground level, even more than I was expecting. And, we know Frank, we know what to expect from him, but
him and Bobby, what a 1-2 combo. So we'll have to plan for more ahead, but there's so much, all these data points. It's tough to cover in an hour's time, but really appreciate Bobby and Frank and your insights as well, as we cover all these data points for Q4 2020. I wanted a couple of things really quick. Want to re-emphasize freight.usbank.com. It's really that easy to sign up for the Freight Payment Index. And on one final note, we just scheduled one of our most recent webinars, and Greg, we're talking about supply chain transformation. Imagine that, but in that give forward vein. So we're going to be featuring not only Kinaxis but Mars, who makes some of the most delicious things in the world, like M&Ms, and Twix and many other things. Ann and Will are both going to be talking about supply chain transformation to make that positive impact. So look forward to that. February 17th, I think they're dropping the link to that in the comments as well. Looking forward to that, Greg.
Yeah, likewise. I think, what Kinaxis is doing and just the culture of that company, if you learn nothing else, even if you don't need their technology, if you learn nothing else, there's a lot you can learn from the culture of that company with Polly and Patrick and John Sicard, right? And Ann, who we've already interviewed on one of the other shows, and a slew of others. So very powerful team.
Boring. Supply chain is boring.
Yeah.
Which is not boring. A little play on the word. That's gotten a ton of attention, a ton of pushback from the marketplace. But nevertheless, Chris Barnes does a nice job there. Hey, to our audience and to the community, thanks so much for sharing what you're seeing. And I know we couldn't get all the comments. Huge thanks, of course, to U.S. Bank and the Roadrunner Freight team for making this happen. Partner, great to do this with you each quarter amongst the other live streams and programs. I always like hearing your take. It's interesting. Kind of despite all the common data points and kind of what it means, there's also between all three of y'all and some unique views, which is really important, makes these conversations much more holistic. So looking forward. Now tomorrow, one final point here. Tomorrow, you've got a special guest on a live stream back at 12 noon or standard time, 12 noon Eastern time, which is our standard time here. And we're going to be featuring Paul Noble with Verison, right?
Yeah, I guess we're going to have to call it Tequila Midday instead of Tequila Sunrise or Tequila Lunchtime. Lunchtime shot. Yes, Paul with Verison, who is an AI data harmonization and inventory planning for procurement and direct and indirect and finished goods type materials. We're not only going to talk about data again and what you can do with it and how companies are solving their business problems by harmonizing this data. I mean, imagine you're an acquisitive company, right? You just bought this company that calls something a bucket. You just bought that company that calls it a pail, and you've got to reconcile that. And now imagine you're a bigger company that's bought 10 companies with 5 different descriptions for the same product. That's one of the things that this helps with. And in this day when companies are so acquisitive, that's really important. But also, Paul has a really big, though very secret and also regulated announcement that he can make tomorrow at noon, but not one moment before. So
not one moment.
Listen up.
Hey, harmonization, harmony. Those are some of my favorite words, especially whether it's supply chain or just in general. So
it's powerful stuff. I mean, some of these companies are dropping their inventory like 20% in 90 days because they've got so many duplicates because one thing's called a bucket and one's a pail and they don't know they're the same thing. So it's a great leverage point for people, particularly in the manufacturing industry.
Agreed. So y'all tune in 12 noon Eastern time tomorrow, our standing Thursday live stream. So check that out. And yes, Gary Smith, I'm glad you noticed. We are absolutely honoring the one and only Hammerin' Hank Aaron, number 44. So I appreciate you pointing that out. And hey, if we have anything to do with it here based in the Atlanta area, we want the Braves Stadium, which we don't want to name names, but Hank Aaron Field. It's a patch won't quite cut it in the 2021 season. Hank Aaron was way too important. So thanks for calling that out. Hey, to our community, thanks for tuning in today. Big thanks to U.S. Bank, Roadrunner Freight. Big thanks to Greg White, the whole team kind of behind the scenes, Clay and Allie and Amanda, you name it. Hey, we're going to challenge our audience and our community, just like we challenge ourselves. Hey, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.